So, hello everyone. This is How to Make Pizza, starring Fen and Adam. Peeling back the onion, Drupal security and compliance. We work at Civic Actions. Nice to see all of you. You guys having a good GovCon? Yeah? Not bad, right? So, my name is Adam Bergstein. I have a master's in information security from Penn State. I contribute to many security-related modules on Drupal.org, including password policy, key encrypt, file and field encrypt, and this is Fen.
Hi, I'm Fen LeBalm. I've been working at Civic Actions now for about 10 years, but recently, last couple of years, been doing security and compliance work, well, more compliance work. I've been doing security along the way, but learning about compliance and doing ATOs, and I have scars to show it.
And he's still upright. So we wanted to just spend a moment talking about Civic Actions. We have a lot, some core tenets of who we are. The first one being open, the second being agile, and the third being transparent. That's really who we are to our core. And that manifests itself in a number of ways, open as in open source and open as in the transparency aspects. And agile obviously influences who we are because we believe in building solutions for people over technology itself. But we are here today to speak about security and compliance because we also work a lot in the public sector. And we have a goal of transforming government. We believe with these three tenets that we can basically bring these ideas to the government and help to make everything more effective and more efficient and have our clients be more empowered with what they do. We also sponsor something called Agile Government Leadership, AGL, which helps to have a consortium of people that do Agile within the government, and they can all get together and collaborate. We offer some training. It's a pretty cool thing, so check it out if you're interested. So, the first question we shall ask ourselves. We are going to start it with a background and work our way up, okay? What is security? First and foremost, we need to start by asking what is the problem with security? And the problem is that it is extremely deep, right? So there are so many tentacles of it and layers and everything like that, and that in its own right are the layers of the onion, right? That's kind of the analogy here. And so we are not going to go into such extensive depth into each one of these layers, but we want to try to equip all of you with some ideas and concepts to make sure that you are all more dangerous when you leave here, to understand the depth of the onion and how to approach the problems that you want to solve in security. And so also with, we have the conventional ideas of what the layer is, and things have changed a lot with the introduction of cloud and everything like that, which a lot of the folks in the room have extensively worked with. So we are trying to give you guys some rough high-level ideas so that it's not, totally overwhelming, just diving in. So what is the objective of security? Well, first and foremost, security itself is about the practical and preventative measures of risk mitigation. Bear in mind, the word in the sentence is mitigation, okay? It's a constantly evolving and very difficult space to work in. So, but the idea of security is really about the practice. It's putting in tools and equipment and policies and procedures to try to steer the risk mitigation, to try to influence and try to get ahead of it, right? And so here's the conventional CIA triangle that relates to security. You've probably seen this in every single security slide ever, and we're not going to be too far off from that, right? So we have the three main tenets here. We have confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And these are really the core goals. Like if you're trying to determine what is it that you're conceptually trying to do, it usually fits into one of these three things, or a balance or a combination of all of them, right? So this is, as what's been called the triad or the triangle or whatever, and usually has a lot to do with how you approach the problem solving at the highest level. So confidentiality is really around making sure that the information is not available to those that can't access it, right? That the system protects the data that it's holding. Integrity basically assures that the data is accurate or complete. It's kind of like a property about making sure that the data actually is what it should be, and that the system is protecting that and making sure that it's not changed or adjusted or what have you. And availability is also kind of critical because you need to make sure the system is up, right? Your users need that, and that's a really key part of security because you have to put measures in place to make sure that that's happening. But what is the key challenge? So the number one problem that people face when they're dealing with security is that every single one of you have different needs because the systems that you're working on are different and the goals that you're working on are different. So every system and every user and every application has different needs, right? So it's not, I can't hand you like a silver bullet and say, here's your security, right? It is very hard to do that. Yeah, darn. So it's really about the problem solving and it's about the understanding, right? And that's why we're here. So let us evaluate some of the guiding principles that we could work with to try to achieve some of these security goals. So in the community, what are some main popular concepts that we could look at? The first one is around least privilege and access control. And this is probably the most easily understood, right? If you limit what people can do in the system, they should only be able to do what they should do, right? That's an easy way to secure a system. And it's also easy to understand. So you have things like access control and roles in Drupal, and you can assign permissions and capabilities. So these are the types of things that you can do very easily to say, okay, Fen should not be able to touch this content type. That would breach the integrity of that data, right? The next one is complete mediation. And this is really kind of two words, but a phrase that encompasses both. Complete means it's exhaustive, right? That you've looked at every single thing and it's totally evaluated. And mediation is the idea that you have put checks in your system to make sure that there are gates that people cannot do what they're not allowed to do. So complete mediation is basically the idea or concept of putting gates or checks in every part of the system that requires it. So the last, one of the next ones here is around attack vectors. And this is really conventionally what are called interfaces or ports or connections to the system. Any way that any person can access the system in any manner is considered part of the attack vector. It's basically the space around the system and how all of the different parts can interact with the system itself. And so as part of complete mediation, this pairs perfectly with that because the attack vector is basically how you could evaluate the entire space and aspects of the system that are being exposed or being used. The next aspect is logging, auditing, and monitoring. I'm skirting a bit more into Fen's territory here, but I apologize. It's a really critical part of security as well. Because it's about risk mitigation, we often need to make sure that we have the controls and tools in place to evaluate risk or measure risk or see how that's behaving within a system. So the logging, auditing, and monitoring are really critical to make sure that you're observing what is going on in the state of the system and you have tools in place to be able to go back and analyze and make sure that you are indeed validating your goals. And if something goes wrong, these tools are kind of useful as well. And non-repudiation. Oh, I have a hard time saying that word. It's a little confusing, right? So this is basically making sure that if you have a user that's in the system, right, that you've validated that they are truly who they are. And this is really kind of important, right? Because if you have, if your site or your system can make it really easy for someone to like steal a password and log in as somebody else, you're not really guaranteeing that that user is who they are, right? And so whatever they do in the system could be a lot more dangerous. So, and we will be talking a lot about, some of the things that kind of steer this, like password policy and two-factor authentication and things like that. So hang tight for a bit. But really, this is one of the key parts of security is, again, about being proactive and not reactive. So you can build out measures to secure your system or your infrastructure. And it's really critical that you test this. Like, it's actually, once you do start building the measures out, you should have things in place that you can evaluate if you're meeting your goals, right? And by the way, you should do it ongoing. And so that includes things like backups and monitoring tools and intrusion detection and running scans that are going to try to get in and attack the system and do that. Word of advice, don't find out later that it's not working, because that usually is not good. I'm going to pass it over to Fen.
So the question is why compliance? Well, Adam just mentioned complete mediation, and one of the things about I've been building systems for many years, and I don't think I've ever built one with complete mediation. There's always things that you've forgotten or missed or not seen or thought about. And one of the ideas of compliance is to try to cover a large area of possible attack vectors, of possible security breaches that could happen, and present them and say, okay, have you done this? Have you done that? Sort of, that's a general idea behind it.
Hit the arrow.
Oh yeah. And compliance is not just a good idea, it's the law. A lot of people think about it this way, but you don't really want to think about it like that. You want to think about it as something that's going to help you create a system that is going to be secure, help keep people out, and help find people when you want them. When you're first told, thank you, when you're first told about that you need to do compliant, your system needs to be compliant, it can bring tears to your eyes. It brought tears to my eyes.
And that is an onion, by the way.
Yeah, it looks a little bit like an apple.
Because every one of those layers can cause you pain.
We'll be talking a bit more about those layers. The current state of the art in compliance is risk management. There's always going to be risk, no matter how tight unless you unplug your system from the net, turn it off, and bury it underground, and even then somebody could dig it up probably. So there's risk management. The risk is the likely that something will happen, something bad will happen. There's oh, I see, it goes the other way. There's vulnerabilities that you have to look for, which are weaknesses in the systems. There's threats through threat vectors. And then a risk assessment is carried out by a team of people who are going to be checking to see what level of risk exists, and are the product owners okay with that level of risk. So the risk management framework is actually something that came out of FISMA. FISMA is the Federal Information Management and Security Act. If I got the letters right. Security and Management Act. Yeah, I twisted it around. Of 2002, where basically around that time the government was having more computers and they started getting hacked, and they realized, okay, we need to do something about this. We need to create a law saying all our systems are a certain amount are secure to a certain level. And the process of deciding that they are secure is called the risk management framework. And what the first step in the risk management framework is a cycle here. Actually, the arrows are visible, but barely.
Yeah, it's showing up better on the computer screen. There's a circle that starts from step one and goes
all the way around
clockwise.
So step one is categorizing the information system, which is what level of information do you have? Do you have classified information, unclassified? How much PII, personally identifiable information do you have? What's the security risk if some of that information gets out into the world or gets modified? Then there's a set of controls. There's about 900 controls, I think, total. If we're running the system we're building right now is a low security risk categorization, so we only have 300 controls we have to worry about only. So you select the controls that you need to worry about. You implement the controls in one way or another to show that that you've managed that control. You've taken care of that threat vector or that issue that's the control mentions. You assess that you've done the security controls in the right way. This is all going to come back to the onion too, because there's actually multiple layers that this has to be done on. Then you get the system authorization, which is what's called the ATO, or authority to operate. The authority to operate is currently it's traditionally been a system that a procedure that you have to go through every 3 years. Once you get an authority to operate, you're good to go for 3 years. But in my experience, hackers don't wait 3 years to decide we're going to try to do something different. So there's the step 6, which is monitor security checks, which is becoming a law. Continuous monitoring must be implemented by 2017. A lot of people are just starting to get into that. But the step beyond that, I'd put a step 7, is continuous authorization, which is really you want to be able to push a button at any point or have a screen that shows you we're secure through all of these processes. And that's not even, it's barely being talked about right now. It's sort of come up in a couple of areas.
You're stealing our thunder for later.
Okay, so there's 3 basic control types. There's administrative controls, which is what the organization has to do. Like, for example, you might have to go through security training as an organization. As a member in your organization, you might have to ensure that your systems are purchased from the right place. You have technical controls. Do you have access lists set up? Do you have firewalls set up? Do you have virtual private clouds? And you have physical, which is, can someone come up and plug in a USB drive into your system? Can they pick up your system and take it home? One of the things that's happening on the cloud that's really good is there's a system called FedRAMP, which I forget what the acronym means offhand, but there's a lot of cloud service providers right now that are FedRAMP certified, and look for one of those because they take the whole physical layer of security and handle like 99% of that for you. So the FedRAMP certified place, you don't have to worry about that somebody's going to plug a USB in it, because they have their systems locked down and staff that have been trained and will make sure that nobody plugs a USB into the system unless they should. Okay. And so the benefits of compliance, one of the things I've found is I've always thought I built secure systems when I had my sysadmin hat on. But then I go through the RMF, and there are things in it like scanning regularly, or making sure you really do keep your LAMP stack up to date, or making sure that you keep your Drupal up to date. We all think we keep our systems up to date, but when you've got somebody looking over your shoulder saying every month your system's got to be up to date, you're doing a little bit more often than maybe you were otherwise. Reviewing your logs, managing access control. We all manage access control, but then when somebody with privileged access leaves, how soon do you remove that access control from that account? Lots of good things to think about. I'll mention the last one too, the Bastion SSH host CDN. If you have a cloud, if you have a CDN, then your cloud only has to be looking at one IP, and you can close out access from any other IP except from your CDN. Same thing with SSH. You can have a Bastion SSH host that connects to 50 machines inside, but all those 50 machines only allow port 22 from that one machine, which really cuts down the surface area of the security. And another thing very important to know is that compliance, once you go through the entire RMF and you've passed everything, you're not necessarily secure. There's a lot of things beyond that.
Yeah, the two are not, you're not guaranteed to be secure if you have everything compliant in your system. The two are not equal. But how are they related? So a really critical part of this is that these controls that Fen outlined and the framework, they give you the guidance, but they're not going to give you the actual details or the recipe on how you're supposed to implement that control, right? So, and that is where the special sauce comes in about trying to figure out how exactly you do that for your system. So there's lots of confusion. Let's talk a bit about the onion. This is really critical to start beginning to understand how do you analyze your security needs. So the first thing is looking at the network itself. What are you doing to secure your network? Well, you could evaluate the ports that are open on the different systems and the hardwire and the routing and everything like that, and blocking IPs and such, VPCs, and having network monitoring.
This is one place that I just want to mention that the RMF kind of breaks down, and you have to really watch how you apply it, because there are, throughout these this onion layers that we look at, because the RMF will say, make sure that you have access control, but you have access control set up in Drupal, in your LAMP stack, on your dashboard, and your CSP dashboard. Oh, by the way, I've used CSP several times. It's Cloud Service Provider. When you go through the ATO, you also get a list of 600 acronyms you have to learn.
The next piece, the next layer of the onion that we consider is really around what I would call the infrastructure. And that touches everything from the operating system to the CDN, or your SSH server, to load balancing. So these are more like the perimeter systems and the lowest level aspects of the servers and systems that you can put in roles or configure them in more secure or less secure ways. And that we're just calling infrastructure, generally speaking. The next piece is more what you're probably hearing a lot about here at Drupal GovCon, is really the application layer. So this includes things like Drupal and search in Solr, or the Apache server itself, and JavaScript, and things that basically are running at the application level on top of your infrastructure. So, and again, this is another super important part. I'm sorry? Do you have a question?
HTTP.
That's the Hypertext Transfer Protocol daemon, which is like Apache or
Nginx, like your web server.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to make
if
sure.
anyone ever has a question about anything, especially acronyms, please speak up.
And the last piece of this is the actual data layer. And this is really critical as well, because it could be your MySQL server that's storing all of your Drupal database content, or a shared file system that's sitting between your load balanced production systems or what have you. So each one of these tiers, you need to evaluate them systematically, because each one of the tiers can provide you tools to secure your system, right? And so, and each one of these tiers also change based on every single one of your implementations, right? And that's the scary part. So you need to evaluate for your specific use case at each one of those tiers to say, what part of the onion do I want to evaluate, and then how do I evaluate that with the tools that I have built? And so our goal is basically trying to make this onion a bit tastier, right? And that looks pretty yummy. So we want to try to dice it up and cook it up and make sure that we've got some good recipes to make this security attainable.
So some of the most common controls that we're going to do a quick overview, and I've got a quick overview of some of the most common controls that you want to be aware of. There are typical controls. We've talked about access control, which is the AC family. There's identification and authentication, which is the IA family. Audit, which you've already mentioned, audit and logging, the AU family. There are actually a total of 18 RMF families. And each one of these families has its own set of controls within it. So you want to make sure that your system's completely implements the security controls in all of these families, and the controls within the families that are necessary for your system. So what is an example? In access control, I said that there's actually, I don't know, about 40 or so different subparts of it. AC2 is the account management. Who has an account? When do you give them an account? Who has the abilities to give the person an account? Can they create an account themselves? Inactivity logout is AC2 sub 5. It's just a part of the AC2. There's I think 9 parts of AC2, maybe more. Inactivity logout. So if somebody, especially at a government system, if a person is a high-ranking official and they leave their desk, when should and they haven't logged out, when should their system log out? usually I think for the DoD anyway, that's 15 minutes. But you can set that up. There's separation of duties. Who has the right to, like, does the person who create accounts also can raise privileges or change text on the site? You may want to have different people have different abilities to do different things, and that's also part of AC6, which is least privilege. If a person doesn't need to have access to something, according to RMF, why give them access? Look at that and review it. And when you read through the RMF, there's a good amount of text about each one of these to explain them.
And under the AC family of controls, there are corresponding solutions in Drupal. And again, this is one example of how you could apply Drupal concepts for security inside of just this specific family. First and foremost, you have inherent roles and permissions inside of Drupal, right? So that gives you the separation of duty. And then Contrib offers a lot of different tools that you can tweak and adjust based on your needs. Auto logout gives you the kind of timing metric of logging someone out of the Drupal site after any given amount of time. Password policy, my module, basically allows you to write really, really strong passwords and have roles in place that you can send back to your authorizing officer to basically say, hey, I have all of these roles to protect these accounts on my site as part of your ATO. And then we have two-factor authentication and simple SAML PHP. I wrote two-factor auth in Drupal 8, and that's a really fun module and very flexible as well. I built a plugin system for all of you so you could extend it for your own use cases. And then we have the permissions-based modules too. So if you need to get more granular, like say Drupal out of the box doesn't give you enough granularity about trying to specify who should be doing what, there are many, many, many modules that you can use to extend that, like taxonomy access control or field permissions. And those modules make it such that you can assign roles very specific capabilities in the site so that you don't have to worry about trying to give them something that's too overarching as part of that. And again, we gave one example, but the handout that we gave out basically gives you a lot more details around security and compliance recommendations that that you can consider. It's not. It's still based on your use case. Yes, sir.
You mentioned Contrib. What's that?
Oh, sorry. Contributed modules. So in Drupal, you have core, and that is what ships with every site. But then you can optionally go out to the community and download any contributed modules for your use case that you might want. So the modules that I listed on the other slide back here, oh, I went too far, are some examples of contributed modules that the community has built and given back that you can use and download. Yeah, so password policy is the name, auto logout, TFA. Yep.
We have the exact name here under Drupal Tools Practices IA5 Authentication Management and Password _ policy. So if you look for that on Drupal.org, you'll see it.
Sometimes it's hard to find them.
Absolutely. Yep. I understand. Cool. And so we're going to take a look a bit more at some of these current challenges that we feel like you guys are probably facing out in the world. And we live and breathe this every single day. So first and foremost, I think that we really suffer from a lack of defined best practices, just as a broader community. And this really is because I think people throw their hands up. I think everyone knows that every system is unique and has different security considerations. So it's extremely hard to go and say, let's just give you a set of best practices. They might work for your use case or they might not. It's just as much about the evaluation as the best practices themselves. So we need to have a better way of discussing these challenges. We need to try to evaluate that and look at the relationships between these controls that guide and steer the security with what are the associated best practices that you could use potentially to meet your use case, right? And we need to better document these things so they're more visible and more transparent within the community. Education is huge in this. And I think because there's so much innovation in technology. All of the classical ways of securing a system are becoming outdated. And I think the actual learning and enablement aspects of things have not kept up as strongly with the technology. And so it's really hard, I think, for classical, traditional system administrators who are looking at all of this new technology in at a whole space of new things that are just really hard to grok and understand. And I think we need to really focus on the learning and enablement aspects of this. And I look at organizations like 18F and the USDS who are helping steer and drive this conversation very broadly about how to leverage cloud systems and CSPs and everything like that. So I would really strongly encourage that everybody get on board and follow what the work that they're doing within their team. It's really quite fascinating. And that can really, in my opinion, directly relates to making security and compliance a more attainable goal within the government.
I just want to throw in that also educating the reviewers is really quite something. We've been building a cloud system on AWS, and our authorizing official has really no idea about what cloud systems are, and also no idea what Linux is. I mean, he's used some Linux systems, but he seems to have not very good knowledge. So the whole process of explaining how SELinux works, for example, mandatory access control, that's something that has been an educational process, and he's coming along, but it's something you may come up against.
And it's a really critical part about ATO, right? So if the person who is signing off on your ATO needs some help and assistance in understanding how you're securing the system, I think you should look at the work that's being done in the broader sense with 18F and USDS and everything. So the next aspect, the next challenge that we identified is that the tools are not super robust right now, and they're not comprehensive. So when you're looking at a security solution, you may need to install or evaluate multiple tools. You're not going to find just one thing that you could say, I'm going to meet all of my security needs, because they're not that robust. They're not trying to solve all of the problems. They might only be solving a couple of the problems that you want. And so you need to be aware that whether you're looking at scanning technologies or you're trying to do auditing, or you're trying to look at monitoring or application level best practices, they're all different. So they all have their own set of tools that you can use at your own discretion. Yes? Absolutely. Yeah, I think, that's largely what I think 18F and USDS are trying to drive towards. And I think that there are definitely people in the community that have tried to do that and define that. But I think we're going to skirt right into the next bullet here, which is the tools themselves are actually not accessible. So, it is not readily available. Oh, yes, Greg.
Well, could I ask, what would you like to see on that list?
Yeah.
What would you like to see? Because maybe we can put it together really quickly.
And we actually are planning
to start. So what would you like to see?
This sounds like a great conversation.
The first 3 items? Just the first 3 items on that?
Oh, okay.
I think we need to take this offline in the spirit of time, because we're going to probably run up against our time window here. By the
way, come to us also. We have some ideas about that.
Yeah, we should talk after. The tools themselves are actually not accessible either. So where do you find them? Do you have to go on GitHub? Do they have a website? How are they being communicated or advertised or marketed? Are they well documented? Are the systems themselves easy to use, or are you going to install it and just be completely overwhelmed? These are all challenges. And really, like I said, there's no magic bullet. It's all relative to what you need. This is the #1 challenge that we face in the community. So let's take a look at some fun stuff.
Where do we see security and compliance going? Well, what's another way we can look at the onion? This looks beautiful, but I got to say I've never seen onion on oranges before. But it's
we're innovating.
We're innovating. So as I mentioned before, the 3-year ATO cycle is transforming into continuous assurance.
Does everybody know what continuous assurance means? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just making sure.
Well, yeah. Well, we're learning too. Compliance is, so as part of that, compliance is pushing into DevOps. It's pushing into something that's across the board, from the organization to the developers to the cloud service providers. It's crossing a whole set of things, and it actually even has to be built in. Right now, a lot of continuous integration systems automatically run tests, automated tests. They should also run automated security checks at the same time. So what you want to build is small, discrete components and automate. So every time you see something that you're having to do, when a particular module needs to be checked for, does it have auto logout set, turned on, enabled, have a 15-minute time limit on it, those should all be checks that just happen automatically and also happen automatically, maybe on a daily or weekly basis, and put up on a dashboard so you can see it. And where are things going? They're moving away, actually. All these things that we're talking about so far is the forefront of security technology, really, is beginning to realize, okay, no matter how many locks and walls we put up, people are going to get in. So what we want to do is we want to have intrusion detection, find them, see them as soon as they get in, isolate them, keep them in a corner of the room, and minimize the damages. So and along also, is there so many things happening, how do you keep track of it? There are things, this is one example, artificial intelligence is the next frontier. We're talking about doing some things that will move us in this direction, but we're not there yet. I just put this up there, and by the way, these slides will be online. This is a really interesting article about a thing that came out recently at MIT, where they're actually predicting when attacks are going to come in, or because of the way people are hitting the system because of network traffic. And if it's a false positive, the user can say, nope, this is not a problem, and the system learns. And really, this is going to help any person who's actually trying to deal with these systems. Since this came out just about 2 or 3 months ago, I've seen 2 or 3 other companies start going to the same area. So this is going to be a big thing. I'd like to see some there's some good open source systems out there. And so examples, coming back to your question of what kinds of things that exist. One thing that exists right now is OpenSCAP, or actually OpenSCAP is how it's supposed to be pronounced, but I say OpenSCAP. OpenSCAP is a STIG scanner. STIG is Security Technical Implementation Guide. Yes, Security Technical Implementation Guide. It is a scanner for looking at a whole bunch of things in your operating system. They actually now have SCAP content for some browsers and a few other things, but we've been using this on a Red Hat 7 system. It's completely NIST certified for Red Hat 6, and it's open source, and it's going to be, I believe, NIST certified for Red Hat 7 soon. We'd like to see it all similar things also done for Ubuntu. And we've got some tools that are actually listed in the GitHub, in the Civic Actions GitHub, that will make it really easy for you to try out OpenSCAP on your own on your system.
It's on the handout.
It's on the handout. There's Open Control, which is something that's sort of part of 18F, which is, they say, a YAML-powered antidote to bureaucracy. We're working with them and with GovReady to help bring this tool together, and it will help automatically print some of the reams of documentation that you have to create for an ATO specific to your system. And it's something that's still being worked on right now. It works primarily in the Pivotal, on the Cloud Foundry, but it can be. We're also working to open it up for other systems. And we're kind of fast, so I'm going to just go through this. This is component schema, which it's basically all YAML files for that. This is one for account authentication. I want to point out this. This is a dashboard that's actually a Drupal module that GovReady, Greg over here, has built. This pulls a lot of the image stuff that you need for compliance into one dashboard. And one of the nice things about this dashboard is it has like what are your known vulnerabilities. It will list them right there. What system are you running? Points of contact to maintain your site so if there's an issue. I like this part over here, manual tasks, because sometimes you forget that. Oh, we're going to do verifier site monitoring due in 90 days.
And so you've heard a lot about a lot of different things. I hope it was useful in a lot of respects, but we do have a call to action that we want to make here. First, we all need to be a part of defining these best practices, and we need to make sure that we have the tools available to build it and work towards that. And we at Civic Actions are a part of that every day. Mike Gifford, who's sitting right over here, and his company, Open Concept, they have a guide called Drupal Security Best Practices. I think it's a great place to start. We have some documentation. There's a GitHub repository that is on the handout that you all can submit pull requests to making that better. So it's a great way to try to all give back within the community and contribute towards some shared understanding of best practices.
And I'll just mention this Ansible role GovReady. I already mentioned this. This is actually a wrapper for Open SCAP. It'll pop up a couple, pull it down this role, it'll pop up a couple of Vagrant machines, a scanner and a test machine, and let you actually see how the system works in a really safe environment.
And the last thing is we are sponsoring a code sprint on Friday, which I guess is now tomorrow, on the Drupal 8 security review module. I developed a plugin system for it that basically allows all of you to build these checks into a Drupal site. And you can use the auditing tool that's part of security review to scan and execute and give that back to the community so that everybody could benefit from the code that you're writing as part of your checks that you're developing for your system. And so we're code sprinting on that tomorrow. Come find me in the code sprint room and we'll have a good time. Thank you so much. We hope this was useful.
We have 25 seconds for questions.